Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. There we go. I found the mute button. I'm totally distracted. Good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is 9 o'clock on a Saturday. Regular crowd shuffles in. Thursday, August 26th, 2021. Eastern Orthodox, my birthday, of course, and Scott's birthday. So happy birthday to you, Scott. You get your Eastern Orthodox birthday tomorrow. So, all good. Some sound, I guess. Some sound levels still up on some of the computers as Greg prepares his raft of stories and Justice gives us the thumbs up that everything's working and okay. I am totally distracted, of course. It is first day of school for us here, and first day of school in like 18 months, actually. I'm watching the technology. I love you / hate you. I'm watching on the Here Comes the Bus app. No reimbursement from the Here Comes the Bus people or anything like that. An app that our school district is using that, I don't know, you log in and there's all sorts of codes and everything, and you get a real-time update of where the hell is your kid's bus, and is it on time and is it late, and puts your bus stop on the map and traces the bus on its way there. So I guess there's a little transponder on the bus and everything. And, first day kinks being worked out. I believe the bus was scheduled to be there at 8:44 or something. And then it showed up, now is when it went green. So a little after 9, which means first day of school, waiting at the bus stop for, 15 plus minutes. And that's never fun, but there were lots of kids there. So whatever, so I'm totally distracted by that. And a nice little bus icon driving by and showing where your kid is. And I guess once they get picked up, the indicator light turns green. But then does it stop tracing the route of the bus, or have they been loading the bus for that long? We'll never know until we know in a few minutes. And I'll update you on everything, because why shouldn't you all have this information? All right. Well, like I said, lots going on, of course, including the first day of school. I don't know how they're going to make this work, and what sort of masking and distancing rules, or what kind of mask I should be sending with my kids. And all the reports lately have been that we need to start moving from cloth masks to N95 masks, or in our case, I guess KN95 masks, what we've been able to get available to us. Let's see, there's the Korean variant, the KF94, the 1 percentage point, I guess, less effective. I don't know. Anyway, lots of pandemic news to cover, I'm sure. And Greg up to 32 notes so far. Not each one of them is an individual story. Sometimes there are extra comments on the stories and extra links on the same stories, but it looks like a busy day. So we'll be looking forward to that. There are as many links here as there are people being evacuated hourly from Afghanistan as well. The numbers are incredible. That's actually part of Greg's lead there. I could leave it for him to do, but it looks like we're talking about 95,700 people evacuated just since August 14th, like since they decided, oh my God, it's a crisis, because people were being evacuated before that. Since the end of July, it's approximately 101,000 people evacuated. So I guess you can see how the pace picked up once the media decided to make a huge crisis of it. And maybe that was a good thing. It sparked all sorts of additional efforts. I'm just thinking a lot these days about how ridiculous it is to assume that Donald Trump could have accomplished anything like that. I'm thinking about if they had evacuated 5,000 people between the end of July and the first 2 weeks of August, and the press had complained about the pace. I can't imagine what he would have done. And by the way, this is a guy who himself owns a couple of, through ownership companies, etc., purports to own a couple of airplanes. And by the way, has anybody seen any of the Trump airplanes fly to Afghanistan to help effectuate any of this? I don't think so. I mean, were there any you'd think there'd be pictures of that. But his big, beautiful airplanes are just sitting idly on the ground in case he wants to go golfing in another city. So, I mean, if there was anybody that could ever attempt to put money where his mouth is, I mean, no doubt about where his mouth is. There's some doubt about where his money is or whether he has any of it. But just noting for the record that the guy has airplanes, and I don't know. Greg, have you seen any news that indicates that the Trump planes have been ferrying people out of Afghanistan?
No, but it's not his fault because the Audubon Society suggested that his planes be grounded because of some diseases that were running through the planes. And so you're not supposed to put those planes back up until you get clearance from Audubon.
Okay. Well, that could be true.
And we got clearance to put our bird feeders back, which is good. But I think those planes the Trump planes are still grounded. That
could be. I would have no doubt that there are probably a lot of diseases on board the Trump airplanes. And quite honestly, I would have thought penicillin would be the treatment for them. But
well, penicillin doesn't treat viruses.
No, but yeah, I think there's other stuff on board of those planes. I don't know how often they clean the Trump planes.
Well, it's something you really don't want to be on if they still exist, if they haven't been impounded. West Wing reports that in the last 24 hours, 3 a.m. Wednesday to 3 a.m. Thursday, Eastern Daylight Time, that's us now.
Right. Daylight.
Approximately 13,400 people were evacuated in the last 24 hours. But here's the interesting statistics. Since August 14th, approximately 95,700 evacuated. You will recall that CNN claimed that you can't possibly evacuate 50,000 people. Well, since the end of July, approximately 101,300 have been evacuated. That, by the way, means that since the end of July to August 14th, before the big stuff started, over 6,000 people got out, not just 5,000.
Right. Well, that's good. The numbers are big. And just for the record, they didn't evacuate 50,000.
So they didn't. Right. They evacuated 100,000. So,
we're still right.
The other things that, of course, have come to light since the hysterical media coverage is that the State Department, which certainly gets its share of criticism for their visa program, and that's been true for years, not just with this, even though Stephen Miller made it even worse. But the State Department and others started warning Americans to get out starting April. Now, why they didn't and why they wanted to stay is up to each individual, and people have their reasons.
Yeah, individual choice, man.
Yeah, and sometimes those advisories are ignored.
A lot.
But you can see the goalpost moving because yesterday we were asking, well, how many is sufficient? Because initially the evacuation was estimated to need between 50 and 70,000 people out. And the New York Times had a story saying, well, it could be upwards of 300,000.
Oh.
So, you got to keep moving the goalposts. Why didn't they get 300,000 people out in the first 24 hours? Obviously, that proves they're incompetent.
How do we know that's the number? I'm curious. I mean,
it's estimates, talking with people.
Oh, okay.
That's what newspapers do.
I guess, right?
They didn't know the day before, but then all of a sudden they were able to put together a story and a graphic.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm curious how they arrive at the number. I mean, they might be right, but that would probably tell us
They could be
something.
right. I don't know the difference. I said the other day, I don't know the difference between. I know how many people have gotten out. I don't know how many people need to get out. And what's the definition of need? That's usually decided by the U.S. government.
Yeah. I guess.
And how many people want to get out, which is a completely different number altogether. So I asked, what's the end point? Well, apparently the end point, according to the New York Times, is 300,000, but that's not what it started at. It started at 70 to 80,000.
Right. And then we got
now the number is there's probably around 1,400 some odd Americans, but they don't know for sure who are still left. Can you evacuate that in 24 to 36 hours? Yes. Why 24 to 36? Well, assume you need 3 days to get the military out.
Okay.
If they said August 31st and assume that is a hard deadline, then you have to get all the civilians out by the 28th.
I guess so. All right. Well, I'm just kind of curious
setting
about
goalposts,
that. Like,
so we have an idea of how to evaluate some of this stuff.
If those people are in line, like at the airport, and you've counted them, I count 300,000.
Well, if you're already in line, you still get the vote.
Yes, true. You'll be evacuated, and you're relatively safe. True. But if it's also like, I mean, does this count people who like put in pick me up in Uber or something?
Right. Eric Bowler just tweeted, media, 2 weeks ago, Kabul is just like Saigon. We got 7,000 people out of Saigon. Media today, U.S. must evacuate 250,000.
Yeah. So then they are on pace to do it now, 300,000. So, okay,
right.
whatever.
And I'll give you that exact tweet, by the way, because it has the link to this story about what the New York Times thinks is the relevant number.
Sure.
And, hey, get as many out as you can, but you can't bring the whole country out.
How many they got?
I don't know. I haven't looked that up.
I will check it. You
know why? Because it's Afghanistan, and nobody's been paying attention to Afghanistan for like 20 years.
Well, we've been all about maybe, killing a large percentage of the people who are there. So
right. 1,500 U.S. citizens remaining, 82,300 evacuated so far. That number is already out of date. It's 20,000 less than was actually evacuated. But I will tell you, here's the Eric Bowler piece, committed to doomsday narrative, media downplay evacuation triumph 6 days ago. As she prepared her airlifted exit from Kabul, CNN reporter Clarissa Ward declared the U.S. effort to evacuate thousands of Afghans was doomed to failure. I'm sitting here for 12 hours in the airport, 8 hours in the airfield, and I haven't seen a single U.S. plane take off. How on earth are you going to evacuate 50,000 people in the next 2 weeks? It just can't happen.
I probably would have reached the same conclusion if I was sitting there and there were no planes taking off. So
right,
I don't know,
but that doesn't mean that there won't be a plane taking off for
that is true.
37 minutes.
I will say,
as it turned out,
it's weird.
A couple of days later,
she started out as like the hero of the American press corps in Kabul. Like she's on the ground, she's staying, and then it became now she's the goat.
Right. Ward seemed to speak for most journalists who lined up for days to condemn President Biden and to predict a perilous future for the Afghan capital. Talk of mass murders and U.S. embassy employees being taken hostage were in the media mix. Wildly eager to portray the U.S. troop withdrawal as humiliating and disastrous and a fiasco, the media was sure the story was going to get much worse, and they were wrong. In fact, it didn't take 2 weeks to evacuate 50,000. It took 10 days, said Chris Murphy, my senator.
Yeah.
Lots of work to do, but it might be time for a bit of a reassessment by the media of this operation, given the actual results. Well, don't hold your breath, says Eric Bowler.
Right.
Don't hold your breath waiting for journalists to acknowledge their assessments of Kabul have been badly undercut by the stunning evacuation success.
Yeah.
Right? According to the New York Times, the optics were so bad, they threatened to doom Biden's entire presidency.
Wow, those are some serious optics.
Yeah, they turned out to be hollow claims given the U.S.'s commitment to evacuating so many people this month. Over the weekend, the Times published sprawling overviews of the U.S. troop withdrawal written by 6 staffers. It was relentlessly negative in its portrayal. This is how the U.S. Afghanistan exit plan unraveled. In fact, they pulled out 100,000 people in a very short period of time.
Yeah. Well, the military can do some amazing
also
things.
A baby born on the plane. That was in the news.
Oh, yes. I did see about that. And
well, that changes everything.
Yeah. Somehow.
Because now we have a story, we have a picture, we have everything. We have, we're going to highlight this because this is how we do things.
And I did see also that the girls robotics team, that was a big story, and they made it out, and that they are on the ground in Mexico.
Yep.
As it turns out. So
the
like
single best story so far that I've seen is actually from Ezra Klein in the New York Times. Let's not pretend that the way we withdrew from Afghanistan is the problem, which is what the media was doing.
Oh. Well,
he says, to state the obvious, yes, he's media, but we're talking cable and Max Boot and some of the other neocons who come out of the woodwork and say, no, you shouldn't have left. To state the obvious, there was no good way to lose Afghanistan to the Taliban. A better withdrawal was possible, and our stingy, chaotic visa process was unforgivable, but so was a worse one. I wonder if there is a correlation between pronouncing Taliban as Taliban and Iraq is Iraq. I wonder if, same people do both.
Yeah,
we'll have to have a linguist on that. The better withdrawal was possible, and our stingy, chaotic visa process was unforgivable, but so was a worse one. Either way, there was no hope of an end to the war that didn't reveal our decades of folly, no matter how deeply America's belief in its own enduring innocence demanded one. That's the reckoning that lies behind events that are still unfolding, and much of the cable news conversation is a frenzied bipartisan effort to avoid it. Focusing on the execution of the withdrawal is giving virtually everybody who insisted we could remake Afghanistan the opportunity to obscure their failures by pretending to believe in the possibility of a graceful departure. It's also obscuring the true alternative to withdrawal, which is endless occupation. But what our ignominious exit really reflects is the failure of America's foreign policy establishment at both prediction and policy making in Afghanistan. I went so far as to predict that the same people who said that we have to stay and were criticizing the withdrawal, and in fact the evacuation, and who got us there in the first place, who therefore say it was terrible to withdraw. Look what happened, how messy it is. Those same people in a couple of weeks are going to be taking credit for this evacuation. They'll say it's because they gave the right advice behind the scenes. Their pressure, their public pressure is what forced the Biden administration to suddenly become competent. Wait for it, because they're never wrong.
That's highly likely. And, again, I would think there's maybe a germ of truth to it. You could certainly say, well, the enormous public pressure forced them to step up the efforts, and that could be true. But, I mean, you didn't fly the plane. You didn't call anybody and ask for any planes.
Argument to that?
Yeah.
Do you think that you set up 100,000 people to get out in 10 days overnight because you just started it the day that cable started covering it?
That's probably a good question, and the answer won't please them. But, yeah, I mean, obviously it's a huge logistical effort, and if you didn't do any of the logistics, and in fact, if you did a rough, back of a napkin calculation on statistics or logistics and said it can't happen, then you got to be wrong, because it did happen.
The pro-work crowd sees this as a mechanism by which they can absolve themselves of an accounting for the last 20 years. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut, told me, Ezra Klein. Just think about the epic size of this policy failure. 20 years of training, more than $2 trillion worth of expenditure for almost nothing. It is heartbreaking to watch these images, but it's equally heartbreaking to think about all the effort of lives, money we wasted in pursuit of a goal that was illusory, and that is why so many veterans are, in fact, in favor of pulling out, as messy as it is. I added that last line, but it's true. You can find those essays everywhere. I've been putting them in the Pundit Roundup.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously a huge question. It doesn't really have anything to do with the evacuation, though, and I guess that was sort of the point.
Well, the criticism has nothing to do with the evacuation. Yeah. That's the point.
Right. There was plenty of criticism to go around, and someone will have to answer for the closure of the Kandahar Burger King, and I will. It
was a terrible idea, but you didn't do it right, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, what about the fact that your idea was terrible? That's not the point. The point is they didn't do it right. They took my bad idea and they implemented it terribly.
Right. The real point is your terrible idea, which came after my terrible idea, is closest in time. You're the one in trouble. All right. Sure. Okay.
Ezra goes on to say it's worth considering some counterfactuals for how our occupation could have ended. Imagine that the Biden administration, believing that the Afghan government, ignored President Ghani's pleas and began rapidly withdrawing personnel and power months ago. Remember, Ghani asked them to stay, so they did.
Right.
The vote of no confidence ripples through Afghan politics if they had pulled out early.
Sure.
Demoralizing the existing government, emboldening the Taliban. Those who didn't know which side to choose quickly cut deals with the Taliban. As the last U.S. troops leave, the Taliban overwhelms the country, and the Biden administration is blamed for speeding their victory.
Yeah, probably. I mean, once you see hundreds of thousands of people fleeing the country, don't you?
Another possible scenario was suggested to me by Grant Gordon, an old friend of Ezra Klein. He points out, for full disclosure, political scientist who works on conflict and refugee crises. If the Biden administration had pulled our allies and personnel more efficiently, that might have unleashed the Taliban to massacre the opposition, as America and the world would have been insulated and uninterested in the aftermath. There have been revenge killings, but it's not devolved into all-out slaughter. In other words, it's not Pol Pot, it's not Cambodia. And that may be because the American withdrawal has been messy and partial, and the Taliban fears re-engagement. What's clearly a debacle from one angle may actually have generated restraint from the other. Having spent time in places like this, I think people lack a real imagination for how bad these things can get.
That's probably true. Although another factor probably preventing it is the country's awash in weaponry, and the people that would be the targets of the Taliban slaughter very often are armed themselves.
Well, thank God CNN didn't get on the air and say this can't happen.
Yeah.
Because then it would have.
Oh, right.
Let me offer one more. Even though few believed Ghani's government would prevail in our absence, and the Trump administration cut them out of its deal with the Taliban, there's widespread disappointment that the government we supported collapsed so quickly. Biden's been particularly unsparing in his descriptions of the Afghan army's abdication, and I agree with those who say he's been unfair, underestimating the courage and sacrifice shown by Afghan troops throughout the war. But put that aside, Americans might have felt better seeing our allies put up a longer fight, even if the Taliban emerged victorious. But would a multi-year civil war have been better for the Afghans caught in the crossfire? Brian Katulis, senior fellow, Center of American Progress, put it simply, I think there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, and smart people are struggling with how to rationalize defeat, because that's what it is. And so this is not in the piece, but you step back and think about that. It's that, what's the definition of success? It's like, what's the definition of how many people should get out? It's their country, okay? So is it a success if Americans get out, but a civil war takes 5 years and kills 10% of the population? Is that what America considers success because it's not us? And the Taliban didn't win?
I don't know.
Are we going to take the approach of, the real point is owning the Taliban? We don't care. Okay. We just want to own the Taliban and make them lose. Been there, done that. Sorry, that's really not a good way to govern.
No, I guess not. And I guess here's a question.
Oh, well, you must favor the Taliban. That has little to do with it.
Oh,
but,
no,
maybe try
not.
to take a grown-up view of like what's going on in other countries, that it's not completely America-centric.
Yeah,
if you are taking America-centric, fine. We're all getting out without American casualties. And if you don't want to be America-centric, well, what about everybody left behind? Well, that requires you to take a look at the entire country. If you're not going to do that, shut up.
Yeah. Just to answer my own question about, well, how who are these Americans who are still stuck in Afghanistan, and how much of it is, I don't know. You want to? They're in trouble. It's a difficult position.
What if
you don't want to say
it's
their fault or anything like that. But I just saw a tweet from The Hill connected to a story. More than 20 students and 16 parents from California are stranded in Afghanistan after summer trip abroad.
Yeah,
at which point you have to
some
ask.
of those have family there.
Maybe, yeah. I want to look that up. That's got to be it, because you can't be like, well, you'll be a junior in high school this year. You want to have a resume.
I'm doing my junior year abroad
right.
in a war zone.
Yeah, it can't be that, right? I assume it's Afghan related people.
Yeah. I was reading elsewhere that
I'm gonna go
some of the people were there visiting family, and now they're having trouble getting back.
That better be it, because between that and like people who wander into North Korea on walks, or into Iran on hikes.
I tell you, that story, though, is guaranteed to get into the papers because, okay, we brought out 450,000, but what about these 20?
Yeah, from El Cajon. So, that sounds like they're all American folks, and they probably are, and I'm going to go find out.
The superficiality of what people do here is what galls me, because if you're going to really look at the country, look at it from the point of view of the country, right?
Okay.
Afghanistan isn't and hasn't ever been really a centralized nation. You can't make it one. We failed at that. And if you're going to talk about civil war and different factions and such like that, what about innocent Afghanis who can't leave? What about innocent Afghanis who stay? Are you making conditions that are going to make it less likely that there's peace there? Or are you going to try to set up something as fragile and difficult as it is to try to minimize casualties? If you're not asking those questions, you're not asking the right questions. It isn't about how it looks from Kabul airport on CNN. It's about how does it look in the provinces, and folks there are choosing their own sides, and that's up to them, not us. And we can't, pacify the entire country and make it look like the way, like a suburban mall.
Maybe Russia can.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, we'll leave it to the Russians. I think they're ready to take it.
Well, that's the other side. Yeah, but what about all those foreign governments who are telling Biden he's doing the wrong thing? Well, two things there. Firstly, of course, we'll give UK a pass on this one, but everybody else, you're free to invade if you'd like, if you really don't like how things are going. The other side of the coin is that there's a lot of pressure on a lot of European countries to not take in immigrants because they got elections coming up and other things in terms of the right-wing parties in their particular countries, Austria, Germany. These are issues. And so that's part of what's driving the angst about what's going on here. They don't want to have to be forced to take in immigrants. They don't want to say that, but that's part and parcel of part of their reaction.
Yeah. Well, just
not everybody's Angela Merkel and say, no, we're going to do the right thing, period. In fact, most of them aren't.
Yeah, well, she's a rarity as it is. I didn't see anything in here about them having relatives in Afghanistan, but it's the Hill, so I don't know whether they covered all
and
that
by the way, just that we're going to talk about foreign countries. Let's do Germany.
Oh,
okay.
All right.
Well, the Christian Democrats, that's Angela Merkel's Conservative Party.
Yes.
Okay. Was expected to retain the chancellorship after she retired, but there was a problem. The main figure who is running in her party was also in the German state that had the recent flooding, which was a disaster for them.
Yes.
And his response looked awful. His party is tanking. And so when I say that there's internal politics regarding many things that reflect how you respond to the United States, that's, keep that in mind. And is that true everywhere? It's pretty much true everywhere.
All politics is local.
All politics is local.
And
so,
underwater.
Keep that in mind. If you didn't know about those floods, you should look them up. And, if you didn't know about those floods but want to comment on Germany's response, maybe you shouldn't until you look up those floods.
Right. Wow.
And the polls.
Right. Well, there's a couple of things you should be looking at. That's that's true. There's always something, and I like it. It does bring us back to the fact that all politics is local. And
Tip O'Neill was right.
And out there in El Cajon, getting these students who were, for whatever reason, it's really not explained here, in Afghanistan for the summer out. They need the Here Comes the Bus app to tell them when they're going to get picked up, I guess.
I mean, why were you there seems so cold-hearted, but at some point later you're going to have to start asking those questions. If U.S. personnel was told to get out and they didn't, why? Did they want to stay? If they did, then why are you yelling at Biden?
I don't know. I mean, if you got family there, I think that's a good enough excuse. I don't need any more explanations. But if you're like summer trip to Afghanistan, but people are eating ivermectin.
For U.S. personnel, if we weren't to get out in April, why didn't you?
Yeah. Good question. Okay, we'll be back in 2 minutes, after which we'll leave Afghanistan.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Germany and Austria, I noticed, were singled out in your worry about European right-wing parties. I don't know if you have any particular reason to choose those two, but... Well,
again, I have to quote the great Tom Lehrer, we taught them a lesson in 1918, and they've hardly bothered us since then.
Didn't go... Well, all right. At any rate, I'm fascinated by the fact that, how did it occur to you to even look that up? I don't know. Was that in one of the articles?
Well, I have an interest in foreign politics, at least when it comes to elections, and I try to at least pay attention about what's going on, even though the focus of this show and what I do on Daily Kos is domestic politics.
True.
And, Germany especially, I like to pay attention to, Israel. And the UK, and those are just areas of interest. And I'm fascinated by things that I don't know, and so I always like to look things up. I happen to follow a German reporter who I'm Twitter friends with, and we exchange polls because polling, as you probably know, is the Romulan neutral zone.
Yes.
Of American politics. If you're just exchanging polls and data, you could do that with conservatives and people from all over the world who happen to come up with interesting things. And so that's part of my Twitter network.
I believe they did that.
He sent me this recent poll on Germany showing that Angela Merkel's party has really lost a lot of steam over the last 5 weeks. And I'm telling you, the poll doesn't say it, or if it does, I haven't seen it written, but I'm telling you, it's because of the disastrous flooding and the disastrous response to the flooding.
Well, I think that's
Did you know in Germany, for example, they don't have an alert network. If you have a smartphone,
yes.
like here in Connecticut, you might get an alert, thunderstorm warning, flash flood warning,
sure.
Hurricane warning, that sort of thing. Tornado warning if you live in Oklahoma. That's like standard in the United States. They don't have that in Germany. They don't have that network. They don't have that process. And so everybody was taken by surprise by the flood and then finger pointing. And so it's a big deal and it has political ramifications. And given that it might affect who's the next chancellor, ramifications around the world, that will affect the United States' interests. And there's a reason why you should pay attention to international politics.
Yes. Ramifications, schmamifications, which is actually the full German word for ramifications. But all true. And by the way, in terms of exchanging polls, I believe the Germans and Russians did that in 1939 for a while.
Well, that's a different story.
Okay.
The Poles had, a lot to worry about in terms of who was exchanging them. But that's a different issue.
Sorry,
we have other things to talk about today. And in addition to Afghanistan, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. Ariel Levin-Becker, who follows communications for Connecticut Health, has this really nice thread that she's been putting together on schools and school updates in terms of what's happening. Let me give you some examples.
So you have an
Mississippi, 15% of K through 12 students in the state have been quarantined since the start of the school year. That's 65,000 students.
Good start.
In Tennessee, Rutherford County schools give parents the option of sending their children without masks during 1 week in August. 500 students and 50 staff test positive for COVID-19. Don't forget, in the South, they start school a lot sooner than we do.
Yes,
in Virginia,
quarantining. Right.
Help me with the pronunciation. Fauquier County?
That's about as close as I've ever gotten.
Open with a mask optional policy, and 15% of students did not wear masks. After 370 students and 3 staff members had a quarantine, the school district now requires masks.
Well, there's no science.
Right, and here's the important one in my view. I'll tell you why. Ohio, Lockland City School District revised its policies to mandate masks after its football team was unable to compete because so many players were in quarantine. I personally feel the whole message should be wear your damn mask so we can play football.
That's right. You wouldn't play football without a mask, would you?
Well, if you want parents to go for masks, explain to them you got to do it in order to keep your kids in school so that they can do sports.
Yes, and if anybody tells you anything about, I see this everywhere now. Apparently, anytime you argue about masks in schools, the line is show me one study that says that masking in schools helps prevent transmission of COVID, and I think there are 30, but that's their line. And then
but you showed me 30.
Things,
you didn't show me one, like I asked, so you lose.
Well, I saw that happening this morning, and then I saw somebody say, they literally said, show me one study, and they showed them one study, and it was they were arguing about North Carolina, and it was a study that had been conducted in North Carolina, which I thought was a pretty appropriate response.
Sure.
Although then they said, well, that study's no good because there was no control group. This was a study of how did masking go in North Carolina, where they
I'm giving you the
things.
Control group.
Yeah, I guess
that's what this whole thread is here.
I guess, yeah, that's it. But they were so upset about it, and then it was like, well, I mean, first of all, I don't think it would be ethical to have a control group in a
ethics, schmethics.
Right, but
You're
the control
taking away
group
my freedom is the point.
Yeah, the control group is, well, where didn't they require masks? Okay, here and here and here. How'd they do? 500, 6,000, 10,000 people in quarantine. Football team can't play. Wow, that's pretty serious. I mean, try playing football. Why don't you send the football team out there without face masks and see how well
without
the game
helmets,
goes?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, then you're just, Jerry Ford.
We smeared ivermectin all over their heads. They should be fine.
Yeah.
So.
Georgia, Talbot County suspended in-person schools within a week of the school year starting because of an outbreak. Kentucky, more than 700 students and staff members, you getting the picture here?
Yes.
Were in quarantine as of August 10 with 95 positive cases. As a result, the superintendent implemented mask mandate. Kansas, Wichita Public Schools, I haven't even gotten to Florida yet. Kansas, Wichita Public Schools will begin requiring masks after 3% of students had to quarantine within 2 weeks. Florida,
There we go.
Orange County School Board defied the governor's order to mandate masks after 1,968 students tested positive for COVID since school began, and 1,491 people were quarantined. Several other school boards took similar actions.
Wow.
And in fact, looking at Florida, I had hoped Florida was peaking, but it doesn't really seem to be the case. Stephen Lemongello reports from Orlando Sentinel. The plateau is not plateauing. Florida reports 26,203 new cases, the highest daily total of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Now, is going back to school fueling this to the point where the peak and the plateau isn't happening because school is making for more cases? Maybe.
Yes.
That's the thing that we were worried about.
Yes.
Florida's in bad shape.
Yeah, they are, and I love everybody defying the governor. Was Orange County Trump? I don't know if I know that offhand. Armando will tell us. But yeah, even the Trump counties were beginning to do that, and as I mentioned yesterday, they've lost Disney on this. So that's pretty serious. Disney Cruise Line saying, yeah, to hell with the governor, we are requiring vaccine passports to get on our boats. And as you know, Disney is the real government of Florida. So I'd watch out for
all of that, and I think all of that is important. Meanwhile, New York City's largest police unit plans to sue if COVID vaccine is mandated for New York PD.
Largest police unit?
NYPD. If the city attempts to impose a vaccine mandate on Policemen's Benevolent Association members, PBA members,
right.
We will take legal action to defend our members' right to make such personal medical decisions. Of course, that's been tried.
Tell it to the judge.
Here's a piece from the Albany Times Union. Court affirms repeal of religious exemption for measles vaccination. Public health is more important to the courts than your freedoms.
We'll see.
In quotes.
Religious, though. My God.
Parents who wish to opt out of vaccinating their children for measles under a former law got changed, and they sued, and they lost. The court said, nope.
Okay, so that should mean something.
Appellate justices in Albany unanimously upheld the state's 2019 elimination of the exemption and a lower ruling by acting Supreme Court Justice Denise Hartman, which was rendered just months before the COVID pandemic exploded.
Okay.
So, good news in New York State in regard to that. So there's lots of moving parts. People are politicizing this, but in the end, they're going to lose. And one of the things they may lose, as we well know, because, we talked about the many right-wing pastors and radio hosts who have gotten COVID and died. One of the many things you can lose is your life.
That's a main
if
thing.
not your health.
They often go hand in hand when you're losing them.
Well, you can lose your health without losing your life.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
You
that
can
happens.
do both.
Right. If you lose your life, I guess
you lose your health, but you can lose your health
typically
without losing your life.
speaking,
So,
right. Or at least it doesn't matter where you put your health.
Right.
Once you've
finally,
yes.
Let's talk a little politics here. I heard today that the Politico was sold for $1 billion.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Huh. To who?
Somebody who's willing to pay $1 billion for clicks, I suppose.
I guess.
This is from Politico, $3.5 trillion or bust. Bernie Sanders, goes all out to protect Dems' social spending plans. The truth is we need more, the Vermont senator said in an interview, adding this is the minimum of what we should be spending. Report goes on to say he's pretty confident that the Senate will do what they need to do because the 50 Democrats will stick together. And in regard to that, Josh Hooter.
Yes.
He was at Brookings. I guess he's somewhat. Where is he now? He's a senior fellow, Georgetown McCourt School.
They bought Brookings for $1 billion.
Right. The timing of reconciliation is getting lost in the infrastructure reconciliation September 27th deadline, he says. Now, that's an ambitious, read that as impossible, deadline to pass reconciliation and infrastructure through the House, Senate, and arrive on Biden's desk. But that doesn't matter.
Oh.
The dual bill strategy has nothing to do with Biden's desk and everything to do with the House Democratic Caucus. Progressives refuse support bipartisan infrastructure, the BFD, without a more sweeping reconciliation bill, which is basically human infrastructure.
Yes.
And in fact, there's a whole story about that in the Washington Post in their health vertical, the Health 202. Democrats have 3 weeks to get their health game on. Oh, yeah, it's a reconciliation bill, but the fact is it's going to do more for health than anything since Obamacare. So
which had reconciliation involved in it.
Indeed. The dual bill strategy has nothing to do with Biden's desk. Progressives refuse supporting the BFD until they get their reconciliation. In other words, progressive demands created the need for the two-bill approach, because it could have been just one bill, infrastructure, and then the other. But progressives said, no, we're not going to vote for the BFD until you support the bigger reconciliation that we know everybody's going to have cold feet about. So that's how it came about. As a result, Pelosi's committed to it, knowing it's the only feasible path to passing either bill.
Yeah.
You got to have both or you have neither. The two-bill approach is relevant only to the extent House politics is relevant to the passage.
Well,
and what he's
that's
getting
the deal.
here is that once you figure out what the House is doing, then the House doesn't matter anymore. Because then it goes over to the Senate, and Joe Manchin will decide the size of the bill.
Certainly
The
could.
final bill will be as big as Joe Manchin can tolerate. That is to say, reconciliation.
Yeah.
So whether it's 3.5 trillion, 2.5 trillion, whatever it is, it'll be what Joe Manchin decides. Doesn't have to be rational. He can just look at it as he always does and says, whatever the number is, it's too big.
Yeah, he can.
Right? We got folks like that in New England. Whenever we have one of these New England town meetings and the town budget comes up, I'm
big.
voting it down the first time because whatever it is, I'm sure they can find something to cut, and then I'll vote for it the second time.
Okay.
Plenty of people do that. Manchin's one of them. He would be the guy that stands up and says that.
Okay.
So everybody knows,
He's
writes
from out of
Josh
town.
here, the Senate is going to negotiate the final terms of the reconciliation bill. Senate Democrats have a smaller majority and much more moderate members, and that's why it'll be that way. However, the reconciliation process starts in the House. Once the budget's adopted, the House will move to passage. Initial passage is only one of three critical votes. You have the initial reconciliation passage, you have the final infrastructure passage, and then you have the final reconciliation passage. And that process is critical in the House, and the timing of which comes first is critical in the House. So as the first mover, Pelosi's primary goal is to deliver as large a bill as possible to accommodate progressive demands, and Pelosi will want to put upward pressure on the Senate's final number because you have Manchin on the other side trying to cut it down.
Yes.
So this will be Pelosi's big test. Can she bridge the gap between House progressives and House moderates without cutting too much from the ambitious original outline? To be determined. But that's where the House drama fades. Once the bill arrives in the Senate, it's going to be rewritten, cut, pared down. Once the Senate passes a deal, the idea about what can pass the Senate's gone, and then at that point, the House takes it or leaves it. So if you're worried about the dynamics between the moderates and the progressive, it only matters, he's saying, to what the reconciliation bill looks like. The rest is just kabuki.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not certain I know offhand what the original progressive demands in the House were, and it may have been...
I think it was like 4.5, something like that.
Well, I mean, in terms of timing, it may have been that they said, we'll only vote for
we want to do it together.
bill.
I mean, this is all Pelosi and Schumer's idea anyway.
after.
It wasn't the progressives' idea to do it together.
No, but I thought that they were interested in holding out until the Senate had passed the reconciliation bill, which is a very different scenario.
Well, but the Senate has to do something.
Well, yeah.
Right, the House has to pass it, and then it goes to the Senate. House goes first in this because it's budget, because it's, that's how it's going to work in this case, right? So that means that they get to have first crack at it, but then the Senate's going to decide what it really is. So Hooters summarizes and says, in sum, the two-track strategy is still in place so long as Pelosi can get the House to initial passage by that date. She doesn't have to get it on Biden's desk. She just has to get it passed. She may not need extraordinary processes like holding infrastructure after passage, which she can do. So as long as she can deliver initial reconciliation by September 27th, the purpose of the approach will be fulfilled.
All right.
The rest is however long it takes.
We'll see. Okay.
So for those of you thinking, how can you get it all done by September 27th? CNN says it's impossible. The point is, you don't need to get it all done by September 27th. You have to get reconciliation done by September 27th.
Yeah, but that's
once you
the
do
hard
that,
part.
then you can fulfill your pledge to pass the BFD, which goes with it.
Yes.
And you do the BFD first, and then 5 minutes
on
later you
September
do this.
27th. Well, it is a tall order, but I mean they've
Hard,
I
but not
assume
impossible.
been working on it so that they know what they want included in a reconciliation package has probably been decided already, so that they just needed to get the budget out of the way to authorize it. But Still,
yeah, among other things. And then the other big picture thing to keep in mind, not that we have been confused by it, but some people are, it's not final passage. The House has to do their job by September 27th. The Senate will then do theirs, and that'll take a while. And then you have, however committee meetings or, however you decide when the House and Senate don't agree on stuff, and that'll take time. And then you have to vote on that, and then it goes to Biden's desk. All that stuff is after September 27th. Nobody says that all has to be done by September 27th, and that's why they're saying that's not the date it winds up on Biden's desk, and that's not important. What's important is that the House get their stuff done by September 27th, and the whole rest of the process, like in Schoolhouse Rock, can take their time.
Well, I'll only say that there are 105 parties to the agreement, so there's a pretty good chance that some of them don't see it the same way.
Yep, but that's the way Pelosi sees it. That's the important thing.
All right, then. I'll take that. We'll see. It's coming up. About a month from now.
And so, I don't understand the process enough to get into all the intricacies of which timing goes first and who, and what I'm especially doing, unlike Politico and Punch Bowl and Axios, is withdrawing from complete and total withdrawal from the idea of who wins and who loses. Who got the most out of this and who got the least? I don't care. I want the damn thing passed. I want to see if it gets done by September 27th. And, the general outlines are good enough for me. I don't really care about the details.
All right. But you haven't been sold for $1 billion, so.
Yeah, that's true. That's why.
Smart guy here. Oh.
Yeah. And I don't really care who's up and who's down and who's happy about it today and who's unhappy about it in an hour and a half. I really don't care. I just want the thing passed. And it's good to keep in mind that what we're focusing on is what the House is doing. Forget about the Senate for the time being. And how Joe Biden, the senator, managed the Senate is actually pretty good in regard to getting the BFD done. The Bilateral Infrastructure Bill, BIB. Right? But in terms of how he manages the House, he's a senator. I don't expect him to manage the House as well.
Oh, that's true. It might not be as easy.
Things that worked in the Senate, they don't work in the House.
They don't.
Even if you come to it and say, look, this is what we did in the Senate, that doesn't work either.
Yeah, right. And I think they learned that lesson. I'm supposed to have learned that lesson among the 9 holdouts that became the 10.
That became a non-story, right? Yeah. So you even remember who they are and whether it mattered at this point? No.
So that's it. Okay. Well, we have a month to find out. And what a month. I don't know. That's it. I guess we just wait and see how they work it out and find out whether any of the reporters knew what was going on at all at any point.
So let's see what else we can tell you about. Let's talk a little bit more politics, but not about that. Let's talk about, here's a good crystal ball, Larry Sabato's crystal ball, How Donald Trump Turned Off Swing Voters in 2020 by Alan Abramowitz. Key points in the article: the number of swing voters, those who changed their minds between presidential elections, has been declining over time. However, there are still some swing voters, and they can be decisive in the nation's highly competitive presidential elections. By the way, even if you accept that the definition of a swing voter is do I show up or not, not do I change my mind or not.
Okay. Still,
it swings because Democratic voters showed up at this election, but they didn't show up at the last one.
Okay.
Not that they changed their mind. I was a Republican, but now I'm a Democrat. Not too many of those. But there's plenty of, I don't know if I'll vote or not. I'm sort of a weak partisan there in that regard. And I will this time because guys seem motivated.
Okay.
Swing voters helped Joe Biden win the White House, and perceptions of Trump's stronger conservative ideology in 2020 compared to 2016 may have pushed some swing voters away from the incumbent and toward the challenger. The vital importance of a dwindling pool of swing voters. Now, of course, this completely fits in with my priors that persuasion is so important, so that's why I think this is just a vital, important article. It agrees with me.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you. The vital importance of a dwindling pool of swing voters. Vital is, of course, the right word because it agrees with me. Swing voters were once the most sought-after prize in American elections. A key goal of most political campaigns was to win over voters who lacked strong ties to either party.
Right.
Data from surveys conducted by the American National Election Study show that there were once vast numbers of such swing voters, but, like the American bison.
Yes.
They
Piles
were,
of skulls.
They were killed off by poachers. and that their votes often determine the winners of presidential election. And so he shows that swing voters, as a percentage of voters supporting major party candidates in consecutive elections from 52 to 2020, in 1948 to 1952, it was nearly 20% of the population, 19.6. But in 2016 to 2020, that had dropped to 5%.
Okay. Yeah, I believe it.
Right. So they're still there. That 5% can be crucial because, if you win by 5% these days, it's deemed a pass. It's deemed a landslide.
Right.
It's a demon landslide.
Well, that's true. The numbers have been dwindling. And I don't know what ivermectin is going to do to these numbers.
Right. The dramatic decline in swing voters in presidential elections is part of a broader pattern. But, basically, those 5% are still important, is what the article says. Too long, didn't read. That's what it says.
Oh, all right. Well, I didn't. You did.
I did.
Point. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Speaking of appreciating, let me tell you about the Just Out Wason Center poll. That's from Christopher Newport. That's a university you're familiar with.
Yes.
CNU. Just Out Wason Center poll shows Virginia Democrats leading for all statewide offices. Governor McAuliffe over Youngkin, 50 to 41. Lieutenant Governor Ayala over Sears, 52-42, and Attorney General Herring over Mayares, 53-41. 800 registered likely voters interviewed August 15th to 23 via landline and mobile. Margin of error plus or minus 3.6.
Yes.
So McAuliffe is doing okay. We can't get complacent about that. But, this isn't hide under your bed stuff.
That's true. Although there's really, honestly, there's no other way to feel about the prospect of a second McAuliffe governorship than, if not, that's not complacent isn't the right word.
Relief.
But,
Relief.
Okay, I'll take it.
I'll take it. Not my favorite. I'll take it. At least it's not Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah, well, true, right. We got that going for us. 800 voters surveyed. Now all we have to do is get them out of Afghanistan and get their asses here to vote.
Well, we can do that in a day.
Right.
And yesterday, Ryan Matsumoto from CBS said that somebody went and found, this is California 120, CA 120 on Twitter. Somebody went and found the equivalent day in the 2020 general for California. And while it's scary to compare 2020 general to the recall, you have to applaud this. Okay. What? The turnout by this date was just under 20% higher in the presidential general. But in 2020 general election, the numbers showed 57% Democrat, 21% Republican, 22% other in terms of what's come in.
All right.
And in the 2021 recall, 58% Democrat, 20% Republican, 22% other. Now, Democrats did okay in the general election in 2020. The point of all of that is that it's not that, there's so much complacency on the Democratic part, they're not bothering to vote. According to these numbers, looks pretty much the same percentage of turnout in terms of weighing the different parties. The allocation of which party is voting is the same as it was in the general election. That doesn't mean that all the Democrats vote for Newsom.
Well, no. I suppose there could be some secret Republicans in there. But
you could not like Newsom and then not vote for the replacement.
Yes.
But if you do that and Newsom doesn't hit 50%, then you've got a problem.
Yeah. So the big push has been, one, to remind everybody, yes, you have to vote. Crazy things can happen.
And yes, you have to vote no.
And yes, right. Yes, you have to vote no. You have to vote no in particular. I reject the notion of a recall. And it's apparently an awfully stupid system that they have for recalls. And it must be because they've had like 50 of them in recent memory. So California really has a
and by the way, the Democrats are outspending the Republicans 10-1. So, hopefully that'll be okay too. And again, you don't have to love what's going on. You just have to have a sigh of relief that it's not a Republican. In particular, it's not Larry Elders in that case, but it's not a Republican who's going to appoint Feinstein's replacement.
True. That needs to be thought about as well. And maybe a change, perhaps.
How do we know Feinstein's going to be replaced? Well, I'm just saying. You don't want
eventually, it's going to happen. It's maybe a long time coming, maybe not.
One doesn't know, but you don't want a Republican in the position of even having to think about that.
Yeah, not to mention possibly destroying the state during a COVID pandemic.
Yeah. Well, arguably,
Or
if
after.
51-49 Republicans in the Senate, because something happens to Feinstein, then you have a bigger problem in terms of destroying the country.
Yes. So we'll hold you accountable, Californians, even though
Right.
probably,
So
I guess,
no
if we have a fight,
complacency
you'll
in
beat
Virginia,
us up, 'cause there's a
please.
lot of
No
you.
complacency in California.
All right. Well, they seem to be doing a pretty good job with it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't keep working on it. That's the usual message.
Right. If you this is remember, this is a mail ballot. No excuses. You get the ballot, turn it in now. Don't wait.
Yeah.
Do it and vote no.
I don't know what you could
On the
possibly
recall.
be waiting for. Do you need a stamp? I don't know. I mean, is there the postage paid? Do I need to do
Right.
anything
That's
here?
ridiculous. If your problem is that you don't have a stamp, call David. He'll pay for you.
Yes. No.
How many people in California? Millions?
Yeah.
Well, luckily for you, only 3 listen to the show, so you're not out for more
That's
than
true.
like $1.50.
I would imagine population of California probably comparable to the population of Afghanistan, as it turns out, the whole country. So and if we need to get any of you guys out, first, cast your ballot, and then second, I guess, go to the airport. That's all I ask.
So there was an explosion this morning. Just as Americans' allies say that they were halting evacuation flights, leaving behind citizens and thousands of Afghans who have been cleared for entry. So we'll see what happens. They were worried about an ISIS-style attack, and so breaking news, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Right. Someone, what do you know, wants to disrupt this whole thing. I can't believe that such a thing could happen in Afghanistan, but apparently I'm wrong.
Right.
So.
More to come, I'm sure.
Okay.
So that's my week for today, I guess.
Yes.
It's Thursday,
Right.
done for the week. And then we'll be back on Friday. There's always stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
But definitely things are changing in Afghanistan. It's a difficult country to be in. It's a difficult country to get out.
Right.
And, it's difficult.
True. Yes.
Difficult situation.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. I'll see if I can find out. There's an LA Times story about the students that are there. If I have 1 minute to read it and figure out what they were doing there. Thank you, Greg. We'll check in with you again next week, unless you are planning to drop on Friday, in which case you're welcome to do so. But otherwise, thanks a bunch, and check in with you at the beginning of next week. See who else is getting out of Afghanistan. We'll be right back after this short 1 minute break.
And then the important line, not
we're
school
back now.
sanction.
Okay. Very good. Thanks. Greg's still here helping me figure out the situation with the students visiting Afghanistan. We are back. Welcome back, everybody. And there is, in fact, a line, you pulled it from the New York Post coverage of the story that says they had gone to the country to visit their extended relatives, including their grandparents. A little bit awkward. The editor should have stepped in. I don't know what makes an extended relative, but an extended family, yes. And now they all need to get out. Probably the better bet would have been bringing the grandparents to California, but they just didn't know at the time. They couldn't figure out.
Right, and it was not a school-sanctioned trip, according to the report. I thought I'd throw that in, and then we'll see you next week.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate finding out, because I really did want to see that. It had to be the case that they were visiting family, because I just don't. I couldn't imagine. But there are so many people in the world that eventually are going to run into one or two that are going to say, I hear Afghanistan is beautiful this time of year, and it may be my last chance to see it, because at the time you make such a plan, we've stood up a Afghan government that opposes the Taliban, and everything should be fine. They say they've got a handle on everything. There's a couple $1 million missing, and the president just got on a plane for no apparent reason. But, this could be my last chance. And then people go, and I don't know. Or maybe they need to check something off on a list, like they're visiting as many countries as possible. I would have put that on the not possible list, or maybe next time, or something like that. But okay, at least it wasn't school sanctioned. We can't. We don't hold it against the, what was it, Cajon Valley school system for sending them. But that's also interesting. Is that how many people have grandparents in Afghanistan who live in El Cajon, California? And I guess the answer is 23, unless students, and 16 parents. 23 students. I guess it could be. Maybe it's just 2 or 3 large families. I really don't know. This is It's a mystery. All right, Greg's still skimming this thing. Students and their families are part of a large community of refugees. Aha! Maybe this is who we've evacuated the first time around. A large community of refugees in El Cajon, California, and went abroad on trips to visit relatives, according to Serban. Serban, who's Serban? I don't know. Serban told USA Today, we really should be talking to Afghanistan today, but he told USA Today that the families are all refugees, all with legal status in the U.S. Don't get excited about things, conservatives. And some could have gotten their citizenship, which I think means that they don't know whether any of them did, or I don't know. The way I read it makes it sound like, well, they could have gotten their citizenship, but they chose not to. I guess they just don't know how many of them are citizens by now. But so anyway, I know what you did last summer because you're still doing it, and we can't get you out. And it's unclear. Apparently, they haven't been able to make it to the airport. I assume the Taliban is making it very difficult to get to the airport, and that they want to keep the numbers down, I guess, in terms of... all right. Well, at any rate, here's some more here. The 28 school district, that's the Cajon Valley district, I guess, is home to the large resettlement community with origins in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. So everybody, El Cajon, I guess at this point we might as well say something good about the El Cajon area. They're very welcoming, taking in refugees for resettlement from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, like huge trouble spots, where there are huge swaths of our own country where they say, no, we're not going to take over. We're going to stand outside and yell and point at our signs if you move here. According to the Los Angeles Times, the families from El Cajon trapped in Afghanistan are on a class of immigrant visas that make them allies to the State Department. Make them allies to the State. Okay. They attend several different schools within the district. Serban said the families who resettle in... Oh, it keeps coming. Who resettle in El Cajon are nuclear families. Don't get excited about that, too. They're coming from overseas at these... and Iraq, and they're nuclear families, yes, with extended... Again, just say extended families. With extended relatives remaining in their home countries. Like any nuclear family, they want to see their family. He said, I'm sure they thought it was safe. Well, anyway, many of the families left in early May and June, months before the crisis unfolded, okay, and the president of Afghanistan fled as the Taliban seized power, officials said. And I don't know how quickly news travels in, let's say, in some of the remote corners of Afghanistan. The district has been in direct contact with the families and was working with Republican Representative Darrell Issa's office to try to help them get out to safety. And he's probably not that great at that. But he does, and it is Issa, isn't it? I've learned it, and because I keep saying, how the hell do you pronounce that guy's name? It's just stuck in my head that I'll never know. But here's this is the most dangerous thing in the whole article. Darrell Issa says, I'm working diligently to determine the best ways to help those trapped return home safely. I won't stop until we have answers and action, Issa said on Twitter. And surely the best way to get them out of there is to break into a car and hotwire it and drive them across the border. I wonder where in Afghanistan they are and whether, I don't know. Who knows? Does it matter? I mean, I'm guessing that you can't just rent a car and drive out of Afghanistan. Mountainous, probably terrible roads. I just drove on some terrible roads in Costa Rica, but it was fun driving on terrible roads. No war going on. Very few people attempting to kill us or enslave us under Sharia law or anything like that. So, totally different story. I'm just fascinated by, no matter what the situation, somebody's going to find themselves there on a visit. I just can't believe that. But just, there's a lot of people in the world. That's all I can tell you. All right. Well, thanks, Greg, for parsing through those stories and finding the information. Let's move on to some other stories, because it's just, at this point, it's piling on. I'm sorry they're there. They're probably sorry they're there. there had to be a good reason. I'm glad we dug until we found one. I still probably wouldn't have gone, but what do I know? My family is, I don't have grandparents in Afghanistan. All right, other stories that are equally crazy. I thought I would update you on this bit since we're still waiting for the politics to play out in the House and Senate. I think we pretty much know where we stand in all of that, and it's time now, of course, for all the pundits to speculate on it, and we've covered that. So we can cover other fun things, like the emerging fight between Roger Stone and Steve Bannon, and also some weird news about Steve Bannon possibly being under investigation by the government of Brazil, which was kind of a strange occurrence, and I don't know how much rooting for the government of Brazil I ever want to do, but if they're after Steve Bannon, that's not a bad thing. Let me start here on Roger Stone. Let's see. I saw an earlier article about this Roger Stone fight thing. Where did I find it first? Okay. Here's the tweet that I first saw from The Sad Truth, who tweets under the handle of Reports Da News, D-A News. And it says here, in this tweet from the 23rd, breaking, Roger Stone claims Steve Bannon was a Mueller informant. And then he laughs and says, let's get ready to rumble. And I don't know where he said that, but apparently on some right-wing alternative to Twitter, apparently he was talking about that. I don't know exactly what moved him to do that, but it's entirely possible. And because there were a lot of, I thought, really strange and revealing things, both coming from Bannon during the Mueller investigation. He clearly was saying things that the Trump people really didn't want him to say. And maybe some stuff that was previously redacted is now coming out, and it's damaging Roger Stone's, I don't know what. I mean, not a case against him anymore because he's been pardoned. But, or maybe he's just doing it to get clicks on this other communications network or whatever. But, so what was that all about? Let's see. I have a news piece here. Let's see. Also, I guess before I get to that, another tweet. This one from, is it also? No, the next day, the 24th, from Marina Braga, just a person who monitors the Brazilian news, apparently, and passed it along to our friend NYC Southpaw. Bannon is under surveillance by the Brazilian Federal Police, according to this article, which is in Portuguese, so it doesn't help me a great deal. But that's definitely a picture of Steve Bannon now wearing some kind of weird Coke bottle glasses on top of wearing 17 shirts at the same time. Others who have parsed through the article in their best Portuguese say that apparently it's not a direct thing, that it might not necessarily be the case that the Brazilian government thinks that Steve Bannon did something and they're monitoring him. It might be just sort of peripheral, but anytime he's involved in something that could land him in jail anywhere in the world, I'm excited by it. So I mentioned that there was a news article. I have this report from Raw Story rounding up the latest on Roger Stone and bringing in other names. In the headline here, Jason Miller's Getter social media network. Remember that they had launched that thing. I guess it still exists. Well, Getter, quote, inadvertently ends up suspending Roger Stone, while Roger Stone cries censorship. David Edwards informs us for Raw Story. Let's see if any of the details of the other reports about what's going on between Stone and Bannon are in here. There appears to be infighting among former advisors to Donald Trump after Roger Stone was banned from Getter, a social media platform with connections to Jason Miller and Steve Bannon. So maybe that's what motivated it. But I don't know why he's even mad about getting banned from Getter, because there are 7 other, Republican-run alternatives to Twitter that don't have anybody on them that you can move to. instead. Stone took to the social media site Gab. See, how do you start complaining about having been banned from a social media site? You go to another one. So he went on to Gab to complain about his treatment on Getter. He's a very complainy guy. If you were under the illusion that the new social media website Getter, set up by Mueller informant Steve Bannon and his criminal confederate Jason Miller, I agree with all this, does not engage in censorship, perhaps you can explain why they just suspended my account, Stone wrote. No, and perhaps I don't care to explain it. Perhaps I would rather revel in the fact that they suspended your account. But I haven't the time for it, sir. Bannon is a criminal whose indictment for stealing money will be renewed shortly in New York State. I hear the New York State prisons are particularly rough. Once Bannon is in prison, Miller won't last a week on the street. And good old Roger Stone, he spent so much time on the street. He knows all about it. He later added, Steve Bannon Buttboy, that's a direct quote, and spelled B-O-I, so you know he's serious. Steve Bannon Buttboy Jason Miller shall sleep with the fishes. Ooh, figuratively speaking, of course. And that's a direct threat, and you should arrest him immediately. Gab promoted Stone's complaint with a tweet. Did Getter's big tech-like censorship AI ban Roger Stone for hate speech, which they do not allow in their big tech-like terms of service, while claiming to be a free speech platform? Gab asked. And then we said, we don't immediately understand your statement. Gab, it, like most ultra-conservative communications, just tries to jam too many thoughts into a single sentence. But I guess they're saying that, I guess they're trying to claim that they're they're looser with the bans for hate speech than Getter is. And Getter is a bunch of hypocrites because they said they wouldn't ban you for hate speech, and then they did ban him for hate speech, which is actually a good thing, but a bad thing, I guess, in Republican circles. I don't know. Salon correspondent Zachary Petrizzo said that he was blocked on Twitter by Miller, who is Getter's CEO. Why is Getter's CEO even on Twitter? Because he realizes that Getter is stupid, and Twitter is still kind of where it's at in terms of these social media microblogging goes. Well, anyway, so Salon correspondent Petrizzo said he was blocked by Miller on Twitter when he asked for a comment on Stone's suspension. And then an update, in a statement to Raw Story, Getter attributed Stone's suspension to a mistake, so they'll want him back, I guess. Multiple fake Roger Stone accounts were suspended following user complaints, but his real Getter account was inadvertently suspended too. His correct account is currently active, and the imposter accounts have all been removed, the company said. So it was all an effort to make sure that you were only speaking to the real Roger Stone, but something, and I don't know whether he couldn't wait for the thing to be resolved and just had to lash out at Steve Bannon, or he was going to lash out at Steve Bannon anyway, but in the meantime he's said that he's a traitor to the cause and an informant to Mueller, and I'll believe it. I mean, I won't celebrate his having informed Mueller, and I don't think we should reduce his sentence if he's ever facing one, but if he did it, it would be funny, so I'll just take that. All right, I thought I would update you on that. Speaking of funny things that are happening to terrible people, we have this piece from Daily Kos, where Walter Einenkel has caught us up on the latest on Jacob Wall, that idiot, and his idiot friend and older gentleman companion, just saying, what's his name? Berkman. John Berkman. FCC involving itself in this. The FCC hands down a $5 million fine against right-wing fraudsters Wohl and Berkman. Let's see what's up. Well, the FCC just proposed the largest robo-calling fine in the history of robocalling, and even in the history of robocalling fines, I would guess. Released on Tuesday, the proposal calls for right-wing fraudsters and racist robocall creators Jacob Wohl and John Berkman to pay a $5,134,500 fine for, quote, apparently making 1,141 unlawful robocalls to wireless phones without prior express consent in violation of the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. Phew. Does that fine you a certain number of dollars per call? Is that how they come to the strange number? The proposal, someone do the math. 5,134,500 divided by 1,000. Well, let's do it. I'm reading it to you. I don't know. This one way to make a article about these two idiots just slightly more interesting. $5,134,500 divided by 1,141 calls is $4,500 on the nose. So I guess my guess is that the Telephone Consumer Protection Act says that you can be fined up to, maybe it's like up to $5,000 per call. And if that's the case, if it's not $4,500 in the legislation, I would like to know what made them think, it wasn't a $5,000 bad call, but it was a $4,500 bad call. Maybe we could look that up. This is the problem with reading these articles. You know, I want more details like this. I wouldn't be able to write this thing. I'd never finish researching it. This comes as both Berkman and Wohl are facing felony charges in Michigan and Ohio for conspiring and breaking election laws, conspiring to and breaking election laws after sending out robocalls targeting black and Democratic areas of the states and pushing misinformation about voting by mail. Okay. Let's see. I did skip a part that says that they did point out that besides being the largest fine for robocalling ever proposed by the FCC, it's also the first action where the FCC was not required to warn robocallers before robocall violations could be counted toward a proposed fine, per Congress's recent amendment to the TCPA. You don't have to warn people ahead of time. Stop now or we'll fine you if they do something egregious enough, I guess. All right. And this sounds egregious enough, targeting black and Democratic areas of various swing states and pushing misinformation about voting by mail. Wohl and Berkman's robocalls erroneously told people receiving the calls that voting by mail would put a person's information, personal information like, on a list that could be used for everything from debt collection to mandated vaccines. I think they had the wrong crowd there on that one. The proposed $5 million in fines comes after the FCC's Enforcement Bureau investigation did their own dive into Wohl and Berkman's activities running up to the 2020 election. The FCC's proposed fine comes after its investigation showed that regardless of the racist content of Wohl and Berkman's robocalls, they broke the law by not getting the required permission to hijack people's mobile phone numbers to spread their racist misinformation campaign. In 2019, the TCPA was amended to make inapplicable a provision of the law that previously had required the Commission to issue citations to non-FCC regulated parties that apparently violated the TCPA. As a result, the FCC says that these citation requirements did not apply to the Truth in Caller ID Act, which established caller ID spoofing limits and under which the agency had issued numerous large fines. So not only were they spreading misinformation, but, cowards that they are, they spoofed a different number for caller ID so that the trail would not lead to them. And it must have worked great because the trail has led to them. I don't know why they, I don't know why they did any of the things they did, but they're terrible people. That's the answer. The kind of stupidity that might lead you to visit Afghanistan for the summer without extended family in the area. Wohl and Berkman are also facing concurrent civil charges out of New York for breaking Section 2 of the Ku Klux Klan Act. I didn't know that was in the offing. As the New York Attorney General's office explains, Wohl and Berkman's activities were designed to prevent voters, especially black voters in specific cities, from accessing absentee or mail-in ballots, which would prove to be a critical and secure method for preserving the elective franchise during the COVID-19 pandemic. The two Trump-supporting fraudsters recently failed in their legal motion to have the criminal and civil cases separated. Wohl and Berkman have already admitted to creating the phone calls. That's good. This is an example of the fake robocalls that Berkman and Wohl spewed out to at least 85,000 Americans, and embedded here is a YouTube video of it. Do we want to hear it? I mean, I don't know how long it is. Let's bring it up. Since I put the article in Pocket, we can move it over to the big show-running computer and take a look. After all, Walter has taken the time to find the thing and embed it. If you want to hear just what sort of nasty, rotten, evil crap they are getting fined for, I'd be happy to share it with you. Let's see. Well, we'll press play and see how long it runs and then make our decision. 38 seconds.
This is Tamika Taylor from Project 1599, a civil rights organization founded by Jack Berkman and Jacob Wohl. Mail-in voting sounds great, but did you know that if you vote by mail, your personal information will be part of a public database that will be used by police departments to track down old warrants and be used by credit card companies to collect outstanding debt? The CDC is even pushing to use records for mail-in voting to track people for mandatory vaccines. Don't be finessed into giving your private information to the man. Stay safe and beware of vote by mail.
Aha. Don't give your information to the man. You see, the very hip Jacob Wohl script for convincing black voters in these areas not to take advantage of the availability of vote by mail, because the police could find out and look for outstanding warrants, and credit card companies can come to collect debt, and the CDC even says that they might force vaccines on you. And by the way, that reminds me that I've seen in the last couple of days a shift in the narrative that we heard about early on, that minorities, the various kinds, minorities were, I guess, driving the numbers for vaccine hesitancy and refusal. But as it turns out, the newest information is that that trend, if it was ever the case, has been largely reversed. And I guess they've had some great success in moving black and Latino folks to the vaccination centers, because apparently now the biggest unvaccinated group in America, to no one's surprise, are white people. So that changes a lot of narratives, not just that one, but also, well, the question of who's in the hospital these days as a result of having rejected the availability of the vaccine. And so, for a long time when we were saying, well, people are getting their just desserts if they are refusing the vaccine, and then people worried, well, maybe it's people who haven't been able to get vaccinated, they're working two jobs after all, et cetera, et cetera. If you're working like crazy and you can't hardly make ends meet, you got bigger problems than maybe contracting COVID, although it could end up being the biggest problem of your life and the last problem of your life as well. And worrying that, well, maybe we shouldn't be, too snide about, say, finding out that all of a sudden the Deep South has a tremendous number of COVID cases, because it may turn out, according to the original information, the earlier, I don't know what you would say, the earlier narratives on COVID-19, that many, if not most, of the people suffering from COVID in the Deep South might be the black population. And it still could be true, of course, but this was a reversal of the information we had been seeing earlier on. I should probably make a note to myself to try and find that. It's been tweeted in the last couple of days, but maybe you've seen it and figured it out for yourself by now. But no pen immediately available for me to make that note. I've been moving things around too often, so someone tell me about that again later. This other note here from Greg, we can use in our exit to our last break, and maybe I can look for a pen during the last break, as he comments on this story. To be fair, no one could see this coming. There's an NBC News article that he appends to this. South Dakota COVID cases quintuple after Sturgis motorcycle rally. Meade County, home to Sturgis, has had more than 1,500%, that is to say 1,500% increase in cases in the last 14 days. So I've seen varying numbers for this. We're now late with our music. As I search around, see, that's one of the drawbacks of using the main show running computer to also run a YouTube video of a very poor quality robocall. But anyway, no one could have predicted this, except, of course, those of us who predicted it. And I remember tweeting around to some success that when we were 2 weeks out from Sturgis, guess what? It came true. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I was looking around and I can't find the tweets I was thinking of. I just have to write or figure out the right search terms, perhaps, and find it. But I'll leave this tab open to remind myself that I'm looking for that tweet about one of the latest surveys that broke things down by race in terms of people who were, I guess, still hesitant / skeptical / refusing the vaccine. So, well, if you know exactly which latest info we were talking about, see if you can send it along to me. And let's see. Here's Greg responding to some others here. Okay, still about the Sturgis thing. Shall we read through it? Or, I think the headline probably tells all the story that needs to be told on that one. And, but what's the continuing conversation with Greg here? Somebody noting here in response to the Sturgis article, well, they should avoid the hospital. I hear there's a bunch of dumb doctors and nurses there. Maybe go to Fox News instead. And, yeah, why not? And Greg responding here with something from the Science Post, a satire publication. Hospital to replace doctors with parents who have done their research. Yeah, okay, I think we've talked about that spoof article in the past. All right. And I think I did see one of you with some more information about Steve Bannon. Yeah, here we are. Mars Farmer 75, who sends along KITM hashtagged Steve Bannon wants to turn Brazil into the next Maga Battleground, according to the New Republic. Let's read about that because that's scary. And actually, it comports with the stuff we were discussing at the end of last week about Central American filibusteros, I guess, what we would call filibusters before we started calling things in the Senate the filibuster. Just Americans wandering around saying, let's take over this area because the people here are brown and speak a funny language, I guess. And also, there's some valuable farmland that we might be able to exploit for, fruit or sugarcane or what have you. Steve Bannon wants to turn Brazil into the next Maga Battleground. And hey, why not? This is an August 17th piece in the New Republic. Andre Pagliarini is our writer here. Right-wing Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro wants to preemptively undermine the results of the next election. This makes a certain amount of sense that he would find fertile ground in Brazil. Bannon is happy to help with that. And gosh, does he look terrible. My goodness. All right, I don't know when the picture was taken, but it doesn't matter. He always looks terrible. Former Trump campaign manager Steve Bannon, who honestly, if he showed up any place, if you take his advice, it's on you. I mean, it's, again, like going to Afghanistan without relatives there. Just a dumb idea. How many shirts are you wearing? That sounds like a great idea because of the number of shirts. And, you know, don't shave or anything, or cut your hair, or wash your face, or have certain issues addressed by dermatologists, whatever. Yeah, because you're thinking about politics. That's how I know you got your eye on the ball. Whatever. Former Trump campaign manager Steve Bannon, indicted on charges of fraud and money laundering last summer, is plotting a political comeback. And why not? And going by his appearance last week, and there's more to the sentence, but honestly, you could just, the phrase, and just leave it there. Going by his appearance, you know, he's homeless or whatever. I don't know. But going by his appearance last week at a madcap cyber symposium, that's where he spent last week. He was at the crazy cyber symposium hosted by MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell. He seems to have his sights set on Brazil, South America's largest and most populous country, and I guess among the larger impacts of COVID there as well. Maybe he's helping them with that. But Brazil's, or rather South America's largest and most populous country, could be on the precipice of seeing its 2022 election turned into Maga's last stand, which, let's say it is. By all means, everybody move to Brazil. That's the place to go. Make Brazil great again. We weren't able to do it in America. Pack up and go. Filibuster Brazil. Lindell's cyber symposium was dedicated to the baseless notion that the 2020 U.S. presidential election was somehow stolen from Donald Trump. Bannon gave a curious performance. First, he criticized Lindell for not providing enough evidence for the otherwise very powerful stolen election theory. That's an odd way to start with him. Then he warned that a different election might be at risk, and then he probably gave a dramatic pause and, you know, what different election? Not the 2022 midterms, not the 2024 presidential election, but the re-election of far-right authoritarian President Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil, which strikes me as one of those, like a moment in a commercial or an infomercial, like, where did you get that great, tell me how I can get one, I'd love to know, and it's, you know, like itch cream or something, and nobody's ever going to say anything about, like that, about, where did you get that fantastic smelling itch cream, or something like that. Well, a different election might be at risk. The Brazilian election. Boo, no one cares. Well, that is curious. Bolsonaro's son, Eduardo, who's a Brazilian congressman, also attended Lindell's conspiratorial shindig. I did not know that. He was there to draw specious parallels between his country's electoral system and that of the United States. A bad comparison, since Latin America's largest nation has a world-class electronic voting system, mandatory voting, and not a single credible case of fraud in 25 years. Sounds pretty good, but we may be overstating it a little bit. Despite winning a resounding victory in 2018, President Bolsonaro has taken to openly questioning whether Brazil can carry out a free and fair election next year, and engaged in a quixotic push to change the way Brazilians vote. They should vote by soccer. They're great at that. He has even raised the prospect of military intervention to supposedly ensure the integrity of the vote. That's never a problem in South America, I don't think. Parading army tanks and troops in Brasilia on August 10th. To all but his most ardent supporters, the president's real intentions are obvious. He is preparing to reject an unfavorable future outcome by sowing doubt now. After Eduardo, whoops, I got a pop-up ad in the way. After Eduardo addressed Lindell's audience, Bannon took the stage and called next year's presidential race in Brazil the, quote, second most important election in the world, just sort of shilling for a client, I guess, blithely asserting that Bolsonaro will win unless it's stolen by, guess what, the machines. And I guess we could put music on that one. In reality, every major polling outfit for months has predicted Bolsonaro will lose badly to former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, head of the center-left Workers' Party and the most prominent voice of the opposition. Brazilians, not machines, seem intent on ousting Bolsonaro. But Bannon dismissed Lula as, quote, a criminal, which is actually what Roger Stone, who was also a criminal, says about Steve Bannon. And they're probably all right. I don't know about Lula, but maybe, maybe not. I have no basis for making a decision. With Bannon and Stone, we've just watched their criminal activity with our own eyes for a long time. But anyway, Bannon dismissed Lula as a criminal as well, calling him the most dangerous leftist in the world when it's not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or whoever you're running against in a local election. Bannon was echoing the hyperbolic rhetoric that Brazilian conservatives have long used to describe Lula, a former union leader who became the first working-class president in Brazilian history upon his election in 2002. Even before Bolsonaro's election, and I guess also let me just point out here that Bannon is echoing the hyperbolic rhetoric that every Republican politician in America has used for the last 40 years against whoever they're running against. It doesn't matter if they're an unknown backbencher or an up-and-coming state representative. They always say that this person is either a criminal or the most liberal or the most dangerous leftist in the world, even when it's somebody no one has ever heard of. Even before Bolsonaro's election, center-right politics in Brazil were becoming defined by the dangerously misguided notion that Lula and his party were simply not democratic, or were not simply democratic opponents to be defeated at the ballot box, but criminal conspirators to be extirpated by any means necessary. And I do recall that was eventually, isn't that how they drove him from office? Didn't they get the Brazilian legislature to impeach him on charges that there was some criminal activity? Eduardo Bolsonaro's appearance at Lindell's event appears to be the next step in this strategy. Bolsonaro is now attempting to link events in Brazil to the broader network of fantastical delusions, resentments, and outrages that fuel the Trump base, and by extension, much of the Republican Party. Bolsonaro, with Bannon apparently on his side, wants to make Brazil the next Maga battleground. It'll be interesting to see what this does to Glenn Greenwald, if you have any interest in Glenn Greenwald at all, who, as I recall, was one raising the, years ago raising the alarm bell that Lula was being, I think, if I recall this correctly, unfairly targeted in all this. But now he's got some weird, Glenn's got like weird relationships going for whatever reason with various right-wing figures who it might just be, in his mind, a marriage of convenience or something like that. But if they're going to be targeting Lula as criminal, and I guess Glenn could claim to have changed positions on those things. But if he didn't, well, I don't know. It'll make things interesting if you are interested in Glenn Greenwald's life. If you're not, carry on. This isn't the first time Bannon has tried to take his show on the road, by the way. 3 years ago, Bannon visited several countries in Europe and beyond in an attempt to stitch together a transnational network of right-wing nationalists who could jointly withstand what he considers to be the noxious tides of globalization. So, just in case you're following along and trying to score it at home, he was trying to sew together a transnational network of nationalists to oppose transnational networks, essentially. Globalization. So, there you go. It makes so much sense, and that's why it looks like he doesn't bathe or groom himself. Maybe that's the explanation. I don't know. As Ian Baruma wrote for Project Syndicate at the time, Bannon sees this effort as part of a, quote, war between populism and the Party of Davos, between the white Christian patriotic real people, in the words of his British supporter Nigel Farage, and the cosmopolitan globalist elites, like people who wear 3 shirts and live in biospheres and are Goldman Sachs, hedge fund people and fly around running elections in various countries around the world. Not those globalist elites, the other kind. A boastful Bannon proclaimed that we're open for business, we're a populist nationalist NGO, and we're global, which is bad because globalism. I don't know. That's the world we live in. Despite his meetings with France's Marine Le Pen, Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini, and Hungary's authoritarian Prime Minister and Tucker Carlson's new idol, Viktor Orban, Bannon's so-called movement has little discernible impact on European politics. This is because despite the aura of penetrating insight he cultivated as Trump's Svengali, Bannon doesn't actually know much about how the world works. While on tour, Bannon's diatribes tend to focus on Trump, his miraculous election victory, and the president's vision of tearing down the, quote, global liberal elite. Prague-based journalist Tim Gosling observed in Foreign Policy in 2018, Bannon thrives when serving up the warmed-over remains of Trump's shocking upset. He's dining out on the story forever. But has never managed to come up with new recipes that can be tested elsewhere. He pushes all the right buttons, defense spending, trade imbalances, and crooked Hillary, but Bannon does it from a blinkered Washington perspective, Gosling wrote. Bannon's foreign incursions were self-serving myth-making exercises, grist for an ongoing grift. Not until now, with Bolsonaro, has Bannon found a foreign far-right movement thoroughly interested in his Washington-centric approach. Bolsonaro's sons and supporters are thrilled by Bannon's support in ways that European conservatives never were. Brazilians outside the far right, however, were immediately concerned by the Bolsonaro-Bannon alliance on display at Lindell's event. Writing for The Intercept Brazil this past Sunday, journalist Joao, I'm doing my best pronunciation of the Portuguese names, Joao Filho, said Bannon's involvement should be seen as a sure sign that the 2022 election will be contested. Well, I should hope so, but I guess it isn't always the case there. Even if Bolsonaro is not reelected, he fretted, Bolsonarismo, yes, right, will remain alive, like our problem with Trumpism here. And they will continue to use Bannon's know-how, if he has any, and invest in conspiracies against democracy. Thomas Troutman, a well-connected and highly respected political observer, writing for weekly news magazine Veja, maybe he's Tomas Troutman, I don't know, described Bannon as the link between Bolsonaro's tropical version of Trumpism and the current insurrectionary paranoia that has gripped Trump's true believers. It might just be down to one believer now. Ciro Gomes, a former governor, cabinet minister, and congressman who will seek the Brazilian presidency for the fourth time next year, has harped on the Bannon-Bolsonaro connection since 2018, decrying the influence of Trump's erstwhile advisor. Is he erstwhile? Is that right? Decrying the influence he has had over the Brazilian president. Bannon's ability to shape political outcomes around the world may be overstated, but his involvement will likely draw the attention of American ultra-conservatives to an election that they thought might have overlooked. Bannon endorsed Bolsonaro in Brazil's 2018 election, and met with Eduardo that year as well. After their conversation, Eduardo announced his and Bannon's intent, quote, to join forces, especially against cultural Marxism. That's right, Marxism. Last year, Bolsonaro and his sons openly rooted for Trump to win re-election, sensing that a Biden victory would isolate and constrain the Brazilian government for its careless handling of Amazonian deforestation, among other issues that have raised international alarm, like its careless handling of COVID. But we're not one to point the finger there, I guess. It's not clear, however, that Bannon has followed Bolsonaro's administration particularly closely. Sure, what does he care? Up until now, the Brazilian president's steadfast support of Trump has gone without much public reciprocity from either Trump or his supporters. Bolsonaro stalled for over a month before recognizing Biden's victory. Tactlessly, he reportedly repeated false allegations about fraud in the 2020 U.S. election in a meeting this month with Biden's national security advisor. And while in the United States for Lindell's symposium, Eduardo met with Trump and invited him to visit Brazil. Bannon's endorsement of the Bolsonaro claim that the election will be stolen represents the kind of Maga world validation that the far right in Brazil, slavishly attuned to the U.S. right wing for inspiration, craves. Despite their well-documented tensions, Bannon remains closely associated with Trump, always receiving at least partial credit for the surprise victory in 2016. As a result, the Bolsonaro clan remains drawn to him. As Bannon signals his willingness to engage in the 2022 Brazilian election, his relationship with the Bolsonaros might become clearer. It is not unusual for U.S. political strategists to take their services overseas, of course. It's unlikely that Bannon could guide Bolsonaro to victory, but legitimate victory is probably not the point. Bannon's main pursuit is grievance. Victory merely a happy accident. The Bolsonaros are offering Bannon a chance to be a player in a major democracy's high-stakes election, to be fawned over by unthinking partisans, and, of course, to keep the grift alive. I like your take, Andre Pagliarini, so thanks for sharing it with us. And I think we're up to speed now on what Bannon's doing and how many shirts he's wearing. So, what can I tell you? That's good news. Let's close out, I think, probably with this item from Politico, which has just been sold for $1 billion, so they must be doing something right because rich equals smart, I guess. But before they were sold, they had this piece, which has been touches on an area of particular interest to me. Betsy Woodruff Swan and Nicholas Wu teaming up for this piece yesterday. Secret Service warned Capitol Police about violent threats one day before January 6th. That would be January 5th. January 6th, of course, just Eastern Orthodox Warning Day, in their view. The documents shed further light on the intelligence failures by the Capitol Police in the days before the riot. I am particularly interested in it because I am also interested in, if the Secret Service warned the Capitol Police, tomorrow could be really dangerous. That makes it all the more puzzling why the Secret Service appeared to take no real interest in protecting Trump and the White House on January 6th, even though, one, they warned the Capitol Police ahead of time to be on the lookout, and two, they were responsible for guarding the safety of the second, third, and fourth in the chain of, not the chain of command, but the line of succession to the presidency, should something happen with this unpredictable, weird, wild event that was going on in Washington, D.C. But for some reason, the revolt taking place that would take down one entire branch of government and, again, the second, third, and fourth in line of succession to the presidency, and was less than 2 miles away, and control over which Trump was, disavowing, I guess, later, after the fact. But at the time, for some reason, the Secret Service took no particular notice of it and did nothing at the White House, as evidenced by the pool reporters noting that things were calm and routine. There were no additional efforts made at securing the White House. Nobody rushing Donald Trump to the bunker as they did during a Black Lives Matter protest a year before, or I guess 6 months before. Just a day before the January 6th riot, the Secret Service warned the U.S. Capitol Police that their officers could face violence at the hands of supporters of former President Donald Trump, according to new documents reviewed by Politico before they were sold for $1 billion. The Secret Service's emails shed light on intelligence lapses by the Capitol Police previously highlighted by both the department's Inspector General and a bipartisan report by the Senate committee. Or several Senate committees, I guess. Since then, the Hill's law enforcement agency has pledged reform and said it has made changes to ensure the effective sharing of intelligence, and that's good. And I guess it's all right there in the first paragraph or two. The Secret Service warned not only that they could face violence, but that it would be supporters of Donald Trump, which might explain why they weren't particularly worried on the 6th, but is kind of actually damning evidence against Donald Trump. His own Secret Service said that the people doing this are Trump supporters, not Antifa, not people dressed up as Trump supporters. not Black Lives Matter supporters, Trump supporters. The Capitol Police have argued that while many threats like the ones described in the Secret Service warnings circulated in the days before the attack, no intelligence suggested a large-scale assault on the level seen on January 6th. In a statement, the department said it had received the information about the threats in the Secret Service emails and acted on it by putting out a be on the lookout alert for the person who made threats against law enforcement and escalated their security posture based on intelligence about the potential for violence. But they were just looking for like one guy. No one's intelligence revealed the large-scale demonstration would become a large-scale attack, the department said. The liberal-leaning government watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, right, obtained the documents through a Freedom of Information Act request and shared them with Politico. On January 6th, our democracy was attacked, but we still know little of how it happened and what was done to protect the government, said Jordan Leibowitz, a spokesman for the organization. It's a new one on me. The emails give a further look into the knowledge the Secret Service had in the lead up to the riot and show just how important it is for a thorough congressional investigation to bring the truth to light. Just one day before the attack, the Secret Service sent a warning to the Capitol Police about potential or possible violence. That same day, a separate email circulated within the Secret Service detailing more threats to the officers in D.C. on January 6th. The names of senders and recipients are redacted in the emails CREW obtained, as is often the case with documents obtained through FOIA. The only sender listed on the email sent to the Capitol Police is PIOC-on duty. PIOC on duty. It's one word they've written together, ONDUTY, but on duty. PIOC appears to stand for Protective Intelligence Operations Center, a component mentioned in a 2017 U.S. Secret Service report. The email was sent to a redacted recipient with an @uscp.gov email address. Its subject line is partially redacted, but what's readable says Officer Safety 1-6 demonstrations. Per our Denver field office, a concerned citizen reported that, redacted, we're flying into BWI today to attend tomorrow's rally and, quote, incite violence, the email begins. In addition, the source reported that, redacted, previously made threats against President-elect Biden. The source also reported that, redacted, was driving to D.C. with gear and weapons to include ballistic helmets, armored gloves, and vests, rifles, and suppressors. The email gave specifics about the travelers' motives. The subjects claimed that they are in the area to protest election fraud, support President Trump, and acknowledged the possibility of violence if approached by counter-protesters, the email said. The email also refers to research from the U.S. Secret Service, PID/OSB. That's U.S. Secret Service, PID being Protective Intelligence Division. Unclear what OSB refers to. Yeah, nothing comes to mind immediately. Additionally, it includes a screenshot of a Facebook post from one of the people in question. We have an opportunity in front of us, and for some reason they capitalize front, in front of us to take back our country and abolish the deep state once and for all, the post says. Call me some right-wing conspiracy theorist, if you will. I don't give a F. I read the facts, capitalized, and I study history. He did his own research, just not on punctuation. The ultimate threat to officers was exponentially larger than this single Secret Service email indicated. The Capitol Police officers who assembled at the Capitol on January 6th were woefully unprepared for the mob that overwhelmed them and swarmed into the building. In the chaos, dozens of officers were bludgeoned, stabbed, or injured by rioters. One Capitol Police officer, of course, died in the days after the attack. Another died by suicide days after. 3 members of the Metropolitan Police Department who responded on January 6th have died by suicide. That day continues to be a constant trauma for us literally every day, whether because of physical or emotional injuries or both. Capitol Police Officer Aquilino Gonell told lawmakers in a late July hearing where officers described the violence that they experienced on January 6th. Time now for us to play our way out of this. But a little bit more on this article here. A second Secret Service email reviewed by Politico detailed more threats to police officers working in D.C. The email was sent by a person in the Secret Service's Protective Intelligence Division to people in the department's Protective Intelligence Operations Center and what appears to be the open source unit of DHS. Its subject line, discovery of multiple threatening Parler posts directed at D.C. police regarding January 6, 2021 protests. The sender asked the recipients to please forward to the necessary entities. It isn't clear if the warnings were forwarded to the Capitol Police. The Metropolitan Police Department didn't respond to a request for comment. Secret Service declined to comment. The email said that a person using Parler posted multiple threats towards D.C. police on January 5th. While they appear to be targeting the Metropolitan Police Department, the subject calls for violence against any law enforcement in D.C. that sides with the enemy, the Secret Service email reads. The email that went into detail. You can read about some of that detail in the end of this billion-dollar article in Politico. But it's time now for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. And let's see, I can switch screens and bring you a little preview of what's coming after this. Or you could just wait for it.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, some of the stories he has on tap here. Huge gaps in the U.S. Western Wildfire Smoke Warning Network have left people exposed. An Oklahoma man was charged in the assault on an AP photographer during the January 6th insurrection, and a sham candidate for the Florida legislature has pleaded guilty to vote siphoning scheme.